your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for our Week in Review. Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith saw her new 27-member cabinet sworn in this past week. All but one of the 6 rivals in the leadership race to replace Jason Kenney now have a seat at the cabinet table. Both the United Conservative Party and Alberta's opposition NDP held their respective AGMs last weekend. Our own Naveen Day attended the UCP meeting in Edmonton to provide a recap of Smith's keynote address and press conference.
It was close to a packed house at the United Conservative Annual General Meeting on the Enoch Cree Nation over the weekend. During her keynote address, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith fired shots at NDP leader Rachel Notley for supporting increases to the federal carbon tax and blamed her for alleged inefficiencies within Alberta Health Services management.
Rachel Notley is on the record that she supports this carbon tax increase 100%. That's what she thinks is good for Alberta families. Well, I don't. Albertans can't afford these woke, incompetent NDP policies, whether in Ottawa or in Edmonton. The system, my friends, is broken. Most of those managing AHS today are holdovers from the NDP years. They have had their chance to fix this bloated system, and they have largely failed on almost all accounts. Failure is no longer an option.
Following her speech, Smith spoke to the media, where she delivered yet another apology. This time it was to those who she had previously called the most discriminated group she had ever witnessed in her lifetime.
I'm deeply sorry for anyone who was inappropriately subjected to discrimination as a result of their vaccine status. I'm deeply sorry for any government employee that was fired from their job because of their vaccine status, and I welcome them back if they want to come back.
And according to political blogger Vince Byfield, Smith needs to do more than just apologize to the unvaxxed. He says she needs to repair division that was created due to provincial health mandates.
I strongly encourage her to do things within her party to help both sides see what they've gone through, right? It's kind of like a truth and reconciliation for the unvaxxed.
The UCP is gearing up for a provincial election in the spring of 2023. And according to Deputy Premier and Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf, unity within the UCP is key to keeping the Notley NDP out of government.
Show them that we work together as a party, and in that unity we've balanced cabinet. We're going to take a balanced approach to the province. We're going to address a number of key issues like affordability, healthcare reform, and we're going to govern well. And I think once Albertans know that, I hope to see them give us a second mandate.
Albertans will go to the polls on May 29th to pick which party will form the province's next government. Premier Smith has stated that she will not call an election earlier than the prescribed date. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
In an effort to increase support ahead of next spring's provincial election, Alberta's official opposition held their own convention in Calgary. This marked the unofficial launch of the party's campaign. Angela Stewart was there and has more on the NDP's plans for Alberta.
Setting the stage ahead of the general election next year, NDP leader Rachel Notley says she is ready to start campaigning.
Yeah, it's getting campaign-ish for sure. We're in that stage. This is not only the biggest convention we've ever had in Calgary, this is the biggest convention we've ever had ever.
Speaking to a crowd of Calgarians on Saturday during the NDP's annual general meeting, Notley shared her party's plans and priorities with the hope to garner more votes.
Albertans want to know who we are and what we're going to do.
Notley says her party plans to put a cap back on utility bills and freeze the gas tax at the pumps, adding that Albertans need a responsible government.
And so they really are looking for stable, responsible, evidence-based, responsive government. And that's going to be a key part of our economic offer going forward.
And even while prices are soaring, the UCP has made it worse because they've also decided to take money away from Alberta families.
When asked what her strategy is going forward to take on UCP leader Danielle Smith, Notley says she plans to continue to keep building a relationship with voters.
They know who she is, they know what she has to say, and more as a result, they're coming to us to say, okay, so what's your plan? We need to know more about you because we want to know what your offer is because we are looking elsewhere and you are where we're looking.
Alberta's next provincial general election is slated for May 29th, 2023. And Notley says she feels optimistic that she will become the province's premier once again.
Let me tell you, if hard work and dedication and commitment to public service can win you an election, then I think we're in a good place.
After the break, we'll have more provincial news and the harsh critics of Danielle Smith. Premier Danielle Smith was getting some heat this week for speaking at the grand opening of a new wing at Medicine Hat College because she's in the middle of an electoral period running for a seat in Brooks Medicine Hat. David Egan, who is the NDP critic for advanced education, says this violates the Elections Act.
Well, you know, it's problematic. My reading of the Elections Act is that there should be a blackout period for making announcements during an electoral period, and we are on an electoral period here in the city of Medicine Hat with the Brooks Medicine Hat by-election. And so certainly my reading of it is that it contravenes that element of the Act. And I think interestingly enough, Danielle Smith seems to concur. She filed a grievance against the former PC government making announcements during an electoral period back in 2014. So, I mean, I think this warrants further investigation. Certainly, it goes against both the spirit of the Act and, in fact, historical comments made by Danielle Smith.
For her part, Smith says she was only there in her role as premier. In other news, Premier Smith has canceled a health agreement with the World Economic Forum, saying she doesn't want to have any ties with a group that brags about controlling governments and politicians. The deal with Alberta Health Services would see the province share ideas with health researchers at the Mayo Clinic and Harvard University under the guidance of the World Economic Forum. The forum has been the focus of unproven online conspiracy theories, alleging that it's a front for a secret group out to impose a new world order, destroy capitalism, and force people to have vaccinations with tracking chips. Meanwhile, opposition NDP leader Rachel Notley says Smith is going about this all wrong.
We need our leadership that we currently have to stop engaging in strange conspiracy theorists and strange conspiracy theories, and to understand that down here on planet Earth, there is a crisis in our healthcare that we need to focus on. So if we get to the point where we understand what the problem is, there are a number of things that we have to do. We have to stop talking about creating more chaos in our healthcare system and start talking about growing stability and giving stability to folks in the system.
Lethbridge West MLA Shannon Phillips, who is also the NDP health critic, says not only does Alberta have a huge shortage of doctors, there's also only one OBGYN in the entire city of Lethbridge, and fixing this problem should be of top priority.
There is now a terrible and worsening shortage of obstetric and birthing care here in Lethbridge. Lethbridge right now has one OBGYN in a city of 100,000 people. This affects all communities in southern Alberta that rely on care here at our hospital. It is the fault of a UCP government that has combatively attacked healthcare and pushed the system to the brink. This must be urgently addressed.
Albertans have been facing tough times right now with inflation and the cost of living continuing to rise. It can mean families are unable to pay for groceries. A new hunger count report was released by Food Banks Canada. It says there were 1.5 million visits to food banks last March. That was a 15% jump from the same month last year and 35% higher than in March of 2019. As for Albertans, we accessed food banks more than double the national rate compared to previous pre-pandemic levels. Just under 157,000 Albertans accessed a food bank in March of this year, and that is a 34% increase compared to 2021. Ariana Scott is the CEO of Food Banks Alberta, and she says close to 58,000 children use food banks annually, and around 45% of Albertans that use food banks are families. She says times have been tough for a number of Albertans.
When all of our citizens struggle, it trickles down, and so it impacts our children, whether it's a senior who's experiencing food insecurity or a middle-aged person. It's impacting the children in our province, and as that trickle-down effect happens, so if a senior is experiencing it, their children may take them in, which puts their family at a greater food insecure position. It's not an isolated to rural or urban situation. It is across the province. It is the whole province. And therefore, we have to look at it from a provincial perspective and treat it as such.
The report also says that 1 in 5 Albertans are experiencing food insecurity, and close to 60% of rural food bank users receive government assistance like AISH or the Canada Pension Plan. After the break, we speak with a health policy expert who says politicizing healthcare and adding uncertainty to the board are the pitfalls for our Alberta Health Services leadership. Stay with us for a possible solution. Premier Smith is threatening to fire the board of directors at Alberta Health Services. I interviewed Dr. John Church from the University of Alberta on the subject. Dr. Church has done his research on healthcare systems and believes that there is a path to success for Alberta Health Services, and more money is not the answer. Have a look. Everyone's talking about their failures these days, but to be fair to them, are there any successes that you've seen that have advanced healthcare services for Albertans through AHS?
Oh, for sure. They've been able to bring down costs through being able to do bulk purchasing of a lot of stuff that gets used in the health system. So rather than having each individual regional health authority, or in the old days, each individual hospital having to make their own purchases, Alberta Health Services can make purchases just for one organization at the provincial level, and they have more buying power, so to speak, in the marketplace because they are such a big organization. So, I mean, that's one example. They're doing things now to get health providers to collaborate more with each other, work together more with each other. So there have been a variety of things that they have been able to do, but that's only to the extent that there hasn't been political interference. And that they've had sufficient funding from the provincial government to be able to get on and do the job that they're supposed to be doing. And both of those things have been an issue really since the creation of Alberta Health Services, if not before.
Mm-hmm. And so then, in your opinion, what would be the biggest failure? Would it be the political interference like you were mentioning?
I think that the constant political interference it's extremely disruptive. If you think about any business that you're trying to run, and if you were constantly changing the senior manager, the person who's running your company, and you're constantly interfering with the way they were trying to run that company, what do you think the results would be?
Right. Yeah. Now, John, from your research, which you've done a lot of, what would be the most effective course of change for AHS and the United Conservative Party, for that matter? So do you think it's fair for Danielle Smith to be placing all the blame at the foot of the board? And, should she clean house like she says she's going to?
No, because the current UCP government, the Kenney government, they actually appointed almost all those people, and some of them were only appointed a couple of months ago. So why Danielle Smith thinks that coming in and getting rid of people who are appointed by her own government is going to fix or change anything, doesn't really make any sense. Other than that, she's looking for somebody to punish because of some of the decisions that were made by the government about restrictions that were placed on people during the pandemic. that were unpopular with a very small percentage of the Alberta population, but that small percentage, just happened to be the people that are supporting Danielle Smith. So, beyond that, there is no clear rationale as to why this is going to fix anything in the healthcare system. If they really want to fix things in the healthcare system, what the government could do is they could come up with a policy for seniors services to make sure that seniors get the supports that they need out in communities so that they don't end, things like help shoveling snow, help cutting their grass, maintaining their properties, help getting groceries, help cleaning their house, not to mention the home care services that they already get, so the medical related services they already get. If the government would come up with a really good policy for that, and if the government would also come up with a policy for ensuring that all Albertans have got access to primary care out in the community, those two things alone would go a long way to helping out to bring down the pressures that are on acute care facilities, because everyone now, they end up going to acute care facilities because they can't get the care that they need out in the community. So if the government really wanted to do something, they would do that. And that's not on AHS, because AHS does not control a lot of those things that are going on out in the community. That's government.
When we come back, another timely perspective for Danielle Smith to consider as a new direction for AHS. This next expert says the break from the Economic Forum is perfectly fine and that politicizing healthcare only decreases opportunity for positive outcomes. You won't want to miss this. Stay with us. Stephen Lewis is a Canadian health policy expert who recently returned to Canada after some time in Australia. Mr. Lewis had said in a recent interview with me that there's a path forward for Alberta healthcare, but it's a complicated one. He did say, too, that more money is not the answer. Do you think the scarcity argument is appropriate, or is there another way to look at healthcare delivery and outcomes?
Well, I mean, we've had a history of this, right? I mean, we have tried to buy our way out and increase supply our way out of health problems historically. From about 1997 to 2010, the country doubled its healthcare spending. And did it get rid of wait lists? No. Did it make sure that everybody had a family doctor? No. So, and then you look on the other side of the ledger, there's a lot of research in health that shows somewhere between 15 and 30% of healthcare is either no value added, and some of it's even harmful, like excess prescribing of drugs to the elderly, which results in a whole lot of people ending up in hospital due to over medication and so forth. So it's not always a supply problem, but the reality is right now, we are not meeting needs. So either we have to use the personnel and the resources we have differently, make a real concerted effort to get rid of the low value care so we can concentrate on the higher value care and get better at the things we've never been particularly good at, which is prevention. So if you have a fairly weak or incomplete primary care system, if you have 600,000 or 700,000 Albertans without a regular source of care, a whole lot of people will end up in the hospital because their conditions got worse when they didn't have to. It's a complicated problem, and you won't solve it in a week and you won't solve it in 2 years, but you do have to chart a new course that give you some shot at solving it in the long run. I don't believe the solution is just to dump more money into this system, because if you dump more money into the same system, you're going to get the same results. I mean, we have way more doctors than we ever have before per capita in this country, way more than we did 20 years ago, and still there's an access problem.
You've been sort of championing Alberta Health Services and sticking up for them. What would your advice be to Danielle Smith for her next step with Alberta Healthcare?
Well, I mean, to be bluntly honest, I was agnostic from the beginning about Alberta Health Services. I didn't see any reason why you should get rid of regions in Alberta. But now you have Alberta Health Services. And what we do know is restructuring one way or another, regionalizing, deregionalizing, that none of that solves your problem. Your problem isn't primarily structure. Any structure can work and any structure can fail. So you have this, it's well developed, people know what it is. It's had, 12 years, 13 years to find its feet, to figure things out, to figure out its relationship with the zones. My advice would be, don't mess with the structure that you have. It's not worth it, and it will not solve your problems. It will take 3 to 5 years to adjust to a new structure. The second thing I would say is, you have to establish relationships of trust. I mean, if everybody in Alberta Health Services, especially at senior levels, is on pins and needles because you never know what's coming next, and is the government going to swoop in and abort some plan that you've been working on for 3 years that has a potential to do good? It's kind of stay in your lane. You have a right as a government to set policy. You have a right to act on your values. You have a right to set broad priorities, but let Alberta Health Services do its job. Sure, hold it accountable, but make that accountability transparent. You better say to Alberta Health Services, this is what we mean by performance. This is what we're going to judge you on. And then if it falls short, you've got two approaches. One is, we're going to behead people and we're going to fire them, the lot of you, and we're going to do this and that and micromanage it. Or the other one is, let's do quality improvement, learn from our mistakes, figure out how to get better, have constant discussions, and we'll get through this together. I mean, you're either a unified province where the government, the Minister of Health, the Department of Health, and Alberta Health Services are colleagues, and they work on this together, and it's not us and them, or they're not. And it seems to me the only way forward here that's going to work is if it is a much more trusting, respectful, and a relationship with good communication between people, and that the last thing you should be doing is yanking AHS here and there, firing the board, figuring, we'll get a new CEO and that'll fix everything. That's just pie in the sky.
When we return, a look back at the top local news of the week. Stay with us.
People will remember the veterans and support the veterans and keep our country free.
The search for a missing Lethbridge woman ended in a way no family wishes to see. RCMP have confirmed a body found just outside of Lethbridge city limits is that of 34-year-old Tia Blood, who was reported missing from West Lethbridge October 19th. Last Saturday, her cell phone and truck were discovered in Cardston, Alberta, about 80 kilometers southwest of Lethbridge. On Monday, her body was discovered near Range Road 225 and Township Road 92 in Lethbridge County. She was identified following an autopsy, which was conducted at the Calgary office of the Chief Medical Examiner on October 26th. 20-year-old Hunter Alexander Frank of Lethbridge was arrested in relation to the investigation. He's been charged with offering an indignity to human remains and theft under $5,000. With Remembrance Day weeks away, the Lethbridge Royal Canadian Legion announced the official start of the 2022 Poppy campaign. Poppies have been distributed to business owners, and video journalist Micah Quinn has the story on the important initiative that honors veterans who have made the ultimate sacrifice fighting for the freedoms we enjoy today.
People will remember the veterans and support the veterans and keep our country free.
That's what Mary Ansley hopes people will take out of the Poppy campaign leading up to Remembrance Day on November 11th. She works as the membership secretary for the Ladies Auxiliary with the Royal Canadian Legion in Lethbridge. She volunteers her time and distributes out Poppy boxes to schools and businesses here in our city. Her first husband was a veteran that volunteered during the Second World War, and she says it's vital to make sure veterans are remembered.
I even remember some of the First World War veterans, not too many, and then the Second World War veterans. There isn't too many of those left.
The goal for this year's Poppy campaign is to raise $90,000. You can also donate electronically or view a video on your phone using the QR codes on the Poppy boxes. Glenn Miller, the co-chair of public relations for the Royal Canadian Legion in Lethbridge, says the funds for the Poppy campaign will go straight to veterans.
Well, they go out to helping the veterans in need and their families. They also go out to help with equipment to look after veterans and some of the long-term care. We just purchased an exercise bike for the veterans. It also helps out with memorials and monuments. We can also transfer some of our money to our provincial command if there's a need.
A Remembrance Day service will also be held at the Lethbridge and District Exhibition in the South Pavilion starting at 10:30 a.m. on November 11th. Parents of Private Mark Anthony Graham will also be in attendance during the ceremony. Graham was a Canadian Olympic athlete who represented our country in the 1992 Summer Olympics and was also a soldier for the Canadian Armed Forces. He passed away tragically on September 4th of 2006 in Kandahar, Afghanistan.
The lingering effects of the sacrifice is still quite visible in our community as well.
The Lethbridge Cenotaph service will start at 10:40 a.m. this year on Remembrance Day, which will be conducted by the local 20th Independent Field Battery. There will also be a flyby from a transport plane from the City of Lethbridge 429 Squadron. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
An old battle is being transformed into a virtual reality project for the ages. The Battle of Belly River took place in 1870 between the Blackfoot and Cree nations in what is now the Old Man River in Lethbridge. Here's Micah Quinn once again, who has more on this virtual reality experience.
Students from Lethbridge College came together at Fort Whoopub to learn more about the Battle of the Belly River through first-hand oral stories passed down from Blackfoot elders. Kamina Weasel Moccasin is the Indigenous curator for the Galt Museum and Archives, and she explained the significance of the battle.
Back in 1870, on a day very much like today, there was a group of Cree and some Assiniboine who had attacked some Blackfoot camps that were along the river valley here. They thought that they were approaching just a small group and didn't realize that there were many clans from Kainai, Piikani, as well as some Skapi Piikani that were here. And so it was actually a very one-sided victory for the Blackfoot people.
Chris Hodgson Bright, a digital communications and media and multimedia production instructor at the Lethbridge College, says the VR project will feature stories from Blackfoot elders, which will then be transcribed, animated, and combined with 3D images of artifacts from the battle, along with a few other neat additions.
So we'll have drone footage. There'll be photogrammetry, which is a collection of about 100 photos of, say, the artifacts from 152 years ago. And then what we've done is actually turn them into a 3D model that you can manipulate on screen, but also we've 3D printed them, and they're actually here today, and they've been painted so you can actually see these artifacts and not worry about injuring them or ruining them.
Staff from the college say that the final VR product will be available for public viewing by the fall of 2023. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Stay with us. After the break, we hear about businesses in Medicine Hat working together with their Chamber of Commerce. Keep it right here.